Everyone in Riverside thought they knew Rebecca Matthews, the perfect pastor's wife, the woman with the radiant smile who never missed a Sunday service, the devoted mother, the pillar of Grace Community Church. They were wrong. Because every Sunday afternoon, while her husband preached about truth and transparency, Rebecca was living a lie, a secret so devastating it would shake their picture-perfect world to its core. This is the story of what she did in secret and why it will absolutely shock you. Rebecca Matthews was 34 years old when her carefully constructed world began to crumble. For 8 years, she had been married to Pastor David Matthews, the beloved leader of Grace Community Church. Together, they had 2 beautiful children, 7-year-old Emma and 5-year-old Noah. To everyone who knew them, the Matthews family represented everything a Christian household should be. David was charismatic and compassionate. Rebecca led the women's ministry, organized charity events, and always had a kind word for everyone she met. Her Instagram account painted the picture of domestic bliss. The comment section overflowed with admiration. "You're such an inspiration. Goals. What a blessed family." But social media only shows what we want people to see, and Rebecca had become an expert at hiding the truth. Every Sunday morning followed the same ritual. By 7:30, the family would pile into their SUV and drive to church. Service would begin at 9. Rebecca would sit in the front row, her children on either side, listening to her husband preach about faith, forgiveness, and family values. And every week, a voice in her head whispered the same question. If they knew the truth, would they still love you? The service would end around 11:30. Rebecca would socialize for exactly 20 minutes, then she'd make her excuses. "I need to check on Sister Dorothy. The women's ministry team needs to discuss next month's event." Always a reason, always believable. Then she would get in her car, alone, and drive. And for the next 2 hours, Rebecca Matthews would disappear. David noticed, of course. How could he not? His wife vanished every Sunday afternoon like clockwork. At first, he trusted her explanations without question, but small inconsistencies began to pile up. One Sunday, she mentioned visiting Sister Dorothy, an elderly widow who lived alone. The next week, Sister Dorothy approached David after service. "Pastor, I haven't seen Rebecca in over a month. Is she all right?" David's stomach tightened. "Oh, she must have meant someone else," he said quickly. But he knew. His wife had lied to him. He started paying closer attention. The credit card statements showed charges he couldn't explain. Gas stations on the other side of town, a grocery store they never shopped at, small cash withdrawals week after week. David wanted to trust her, but doubt had planted itself in his mind and it grew like weeds. Was she having an affair? The thought made him physically ill, but what else could explain the secrecy? The following Sunday, after service ended, David told Rebecca he needed to stay behind for a counseling session. He watched her face carefully. She simply kissed his cheek and said, "I'll see you at home." David waited 5 minutes, then got in his car and followed her. His heart pounded as he maintained a careful distance. They drove through familiar streets, past their neighborhood, past the shopping centers they frequented. Then Rebecca turned onto the highway heading toward the east side of Riverside. David's confusion deepened. There was nothing over there but industrial warehouses and low-income housing. 20 minutes later, Rebecca exited into a neighborhood David had only seen in news reports about crime and poverty. Graffiti covered the walls, chain-linked fences surrounded most of the yards. Groups of men stood on corners, watching cars pass with suspicious eyes. What was his wife doing here? Rebecca pulled into the parking lot of a decrepit apartment complex called Sunset Gardens. The building's paint was peeling, several windows were covered with plywood, and trash littered the grounds. David parked across the street, his mind racing with terrible possibilities. He watched as Rebecca opened her trunk and pulled out several shopping bags, groceries from what he could see. She walked toward the building with purpose, like she'd done this many times before. Then she disappeared inside. David sat in his car, hands gripping the steering wheel, for nearly an hour. His phone buzzed with messages from church members, but he ignored them all. When Rebecca finally emerged, she looked different. Her shoulders were slumped. Her eyes were red like she'd been crying. She walked slowly back to her car, set the empty bags in the trunk, and sat in the driver's seat for a few minutes before starting the engine. David followed her home, maintaining his distance. Neither of them spoke when they arrived. That evening, after the children were in bed, David finally broke the silence. "Rebecca, we need to talk. Where were you today?" Her face went pale. Her hands began to shake. "What do you mean?" "Don't lie to me again," David said, his voice trembling. "I followed you. I saw you drive to the east side. I saw you go into that apartment building. I need to know what's going on." Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then finally, she whispered, "I wanted to tell you so many times." Rebecca collapsed onto the couch, her body shaking with sobs. David sat beside her, torn between comfort and confusion. "There's someone there," Rebecca said between gasps. "Someone I need to see. Someone I can't abandon." David's worst fears crystallized. "Who?" Rebecca looked up at him, mascara streaming down her face. "My son." The words hung in the air. David stared at his wife, certain he'd misheard. "What?" "I have a son," Rebecca said, her voice barely audible. "His name is Marcus. He's 15 years old." The story poured out of her like a confession. Before she met David, Rebecca was a different person, living a different life. At 19, she'd married her high school boyfriend, Jake. She'd been a young and naive, believing that love could overcome anything. It couldn't overcome Jake's temper. The abuse started small. Criticism, controlling behavior. Then it escalated. By the time Rebecca discovered she was pregnant, she was trapped in a nightmare. She gave birth to Marcus when she was 20. For 2 years, she tried to protect her baby from his father's rage. But when Jake's violence turned toward their son, Rebecca knew she had to run. She left with nothing but the clothes on her back and Marcus in her arms. No money, no family support, no plan beyond survival. Jake's family came after her. They hired lawyers. They painted her as unstable, unfit, a danger to the child. Rebecca couldn't afford legal representation. She was working 2 minimum-wage jobs, sleeping in her car. The court took Marcus away. "I tried everything," Rebecca sobbed, gripping David's arm. "I fought for him, but I had nothing, no home, no stability. They said he'd be better off with his grandmother." By the time Rebecca got her life together, Marcus had been told a story. His mother didn't love him. His mother had abandoned him. His mother didn't want to be found.